7:46 here on Morning Barbados. As we said, we've got a mixed bag for you. We've had a bit of Bhangra dancing from the Punjab. We've talked about the world of technology with Gabriel Abed, celebrated 400 years of the King James Version of the Bible, and now we come back to a recurring guest and one who's quickly becoming one of our friends here on Morning Barbados. Dr. Beverly Drakes is back to talk about the role of building self-esteem in trying to notice and prevent and combat sexual abuse among children. Beverly, it's good to see you again.
Good morning again. Nice to see you.
Last week we started the conversation about how having strong self-esteem can kind of break that cycle and start with children being set up for success. Perhaps you can continue that discussion in terms of how we create self-esteem in homes that sometimes don't lend themselves to feeling good about yourself in the first place.
Okay. I think the reason why we really do need to focus on self-esteem because it underpins so much throughout our lives. So it starts in childhood and yet goes right through adulthood. There's so many of us as adults whose self-esteem really is still a huge issue. And even for extremely successful people, they can have self-esteem issues. So I think it's really important that we get an understanding about self-esteem. We did start last week to talk about it, but I wanted to probably go back a little bit and just talk about the definition. So our self-esteem really is so important. It's our self-acceptance. It's how much we respect ourselves. It's how much we believe in ourselves. You see how powerful those words are. Yeah, and many of us are really suffering because we don't have those things. We don't believe in ourselves. We don't accept who we are. So we're always striving. And even though we're successful in things, we're still striving. And I think that comes right back down now. We can bring that back to the kind of 11 plus that's just gone and the kind of self-esteem issues around there. Even though kids become successful, some research has shown that even though people are successful, it doesn't mean they have high self-esteem.
But on the flip side, not everyone with poor self-esteem is the victim of sexual abuse.
Oh no. Definitely not. And it doesn't mean that if you have high self-esteem that you're not going to be a victim either.
That's a good point.
Yeah?
That's a really good point.
I think that it is really about us knowing that in any form of abuse that your self-esteem is damaged. So whichever way, whether you've been abused or not abused, self-esteem is extremely significant. Okay, it's pretty critical. I think when we have high self-esteem, we really believe that we deserve good things in life, that we believe that we should be happy. And so therefore, self-esteem is about forming us and keeping us strong. And I saw something the other day that actually said that self-esteem is a child's armor against kind of negative pressure against the world, really. Okay, so how then do we start to foster this? And that's the crucial. And you said, for children whose homes maybe don't lend itself so much to it. But what we have to remember, is that self-esteem is formed from more or less the minute of conception. Yeah. So it's the kind of messages that we start to receive right from the day that we're born. So if we're very much a wanted child, loved right from the beginning, the kind of messages even in embryo is coming through. You're born, the kind of things that your parents say to you, and for a lot of our children, they don't hear the kind of positive messages that they really do need to hear. So I think that the reason I harp on self-esteem is because there's so much that we can do. There's so much that we need to do to really foster it and to keep it going, to keep it growing, and to keep it nurtured, because it is about nurturing. So it is, what do we say to children? What messages do we send to them about their competence? And I'm not talking just about academic competence. I'm talking about competence across the board, what they're good at. We're talking about effort, not just outcomes. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the outcomes and very much miss the effort.
Indeed.
So I would like us to really and truly emphasize effort a lot more, to give the feedback about how well you've done so and so, how proud I am of you that you have done. we want to give feedback that is explicit, yeah, so that you actually say what it is that you're proud of. I'm sorry. It's just so many things that I want to say that I want to keep. I want to keep on. Okay. The other thing is that we need to model good self-esteem. So if we're always beating ourselves up, if we're second-guessing ourselves, if we don't believe in ourselves, then that's the messages that our children are going to get from us. And I've said it 100 times. Children learn more from us through what we do than what we say. So if we're telling them, you know, things to encourage their self-esteem, but we're acting in a way that isn't congruent with that, then they're going to pick up on what they see. They always
listen, but they're always watching.
But they're always watching. Mm-hmm. All right,
Dr. Drakes, where in these messages of self-affirmation and that sort of thing do we say to them, if someone, even someone who's very close to you, comes and presents a certain type of behavior, mm-hmm. you can stand up and say, or make, you know, say something to me, or some sort, because, you know, most times it is this sort of type of abuse is by somebody who's pretty close to the family.
More often than not, yes.
More often than not. So
yeah.
how do you get that into those messages that, like, if somebody does something that is this way, mm-hmm. don't feel too bad about it, come and speak with me?
Okay, we had kind of started to talk a bit about that last week in terms of part of the process of fostering self-esteem is about developing a good communication system with your child. And through that communication system, you develop the practice of actually listening. We're not very good at listening to children. We will ask them a question and we've moved on to the next before they've had time to really express themselves. It is about developing quality time to actually listen. And I know that we're all busy. And you know, I was a parent with young children, studying, working. So I know what it's like. It is how do you create the situations that will allow you to develop that listening. For me as a young parent with children, and again, I said, as studying and so on, the kitchen was the center of everything for me. So when I came home from work, that's where everyone gathered. Homework was done at the kitchen table, so I was cooking, they were doing homework, we were talking. Yeah? And I find that that's something that probably we don't do enough of. Very often children are told to go off and do their homework, and it's always seemed almost like a punishment. Whereas to me, it is a time to really foster a togetherness, and they really enjoyed talking at that time.
I think you're making an interesting point as well here, Beverly, for parents who say, look, I'm tired, I'm harried, there's lots of them and only one of me, mm-hmm. bills to pay, whatever else. This touchy-feely thing about sitting down around the table and sharing each other's feelings, that only works in the movies. But I think you're making an interesting point there about the fact that you were also a tired, harried mother.
Absolutely.
And the kitchen table became the emotional touchstone for your home.
That and bedtime. You know, I'm really part again about fostering self-esteem. It's about responsibility. It's about routine. Yeah. So bedtime, having a set time, a set routine. You have your shower. You sit. You read a story, and you talk. It is about how you foster that communication. That is so crucial. If you have that communication, it is more likely that your child will feel confident to come and talk to you if something happens. It's also about explicitly having that conversation that says about protecting yourself, mm-hmm. and that people are not allowed to touch you, and that your body is precious. And
if, God forbid, the worst happens, because mm-hmm. sometimes after that happens now, the self-esteem that you probably would have been working on has been
mm-hmm.
shattered. How do you begin? What approaches should you take to try and rebuild?
Exactly the same approaches. You start again. You keep going. You keep giving them feedback. You let them know that what has occurred was not their fault. It's not that something that you blame them for. You get back to the point of them valuing themselves and acknowledging their uniqueness and their strength and their belief. It is about us repairing that damage and fostering and nurturing it, and it has to be ongoing. Yeah. So again, it comes back down to the fact that we do need to create within our children that raw, sound firm, solid sense of who they are and a belief in themselves and you know, what they can do.
You think it is important that we stress that the approaches be, well, almost the same for the child, regardless of the gender? Because sometimes you're a little bit more protective of your girl, or you probably, you know, you tell the boy, man up, or whatever, that sort of thing. The approaches? The approaches,
I think obviously gender does come into it as always, and we do have to acknowledge that there are some gender differences, but we do need to be able to allow boys to acknowledge feelings and deal with emotions as well, and actually teach them how to do that. And equally, we do need to give girls some degree of freedom, because if we're overprotective, that can have a severe effect on self-esteem. Yeah.
In our final minute, Beverly, how do you handle the fact that the positive messages at home are sometimes undone by the ones that are faced outside in schools or on the block, and vice versa?
Constant work. You know, it's something.
So you're never off duty?
You're never, no. As a parent, you want to keep in mind that your child's self-esteem, the way that they feel about themselves, is absolutely crucial. And it's your duty to be always tapping into opportunities to reinforce that. Yeah.
Sounds like hard work, worthwhile work.
It becomes natural. Once it's in your mind, it's something that you're focused on, you do it almost unconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's recap then what is necessary in building the self-esteem. I know it comes out in one word: communication.
Communication, absolutely. Fostering that communication and doing it positively. My last thing I know. Recognizing our children's strengths, yeah, is one of the sure ways of fostering self-esteem.
And not trying to put your strengths.
Not your strengths, but your child's strengths. One of the questions that I always ask in a clinical intake is, you know, tell me what your child's strengths are. And we are very good at being able to articulate the weaknesses, but sometimes we're actually stumped as to the strengths. Now, if we're stuck and can't rattle off the strengths of our child, then we know that we've got to start doing some work.
How can we reinforce them? Beverly, it's always great to talk to you. You give us hope that there is a way forward, not just about self-esteem, but the end result, which is to eradicate sex abuse altogether. We hope you'll be back to continue this conversation.
Thank you
very much. Colin, it's time for our nice tip.
Yes, indeed, and it's under the heading of interacting with, or interacting positively with customers. And as it rolls up and down, here's the tip. Once you establish a rapport with the customer, continue building a relationship by showing you care, by going the extra mile. So your nice tip for today: once you establish a rapport with the customer, continue building a relationship by showing you care, by going the extra mile. It's under the heading of interacting positively with customers.